A good place to start, however, would be this recent CNN piece, which has dropped, kind of detailing the massive dysfunction and tension in the White House between Kamala Harris, the vice president, and Joe Biden, the president, of course. This is a pretty explosive and dramatic CNN piece that dropped, and certainly lots of leaking from both camps went into this article, which makes it all the more dramatic. Again, it's not normal for the vice president and her team to be leaking against the current sitting president. That's pretty unheard of. But we are at this point in the administration where Kamala Harris is straight up going to the media essentially here to air her grievances with the way her role as vice president is being handled and the seemingly deteriorating relationship between herself and Joe Biden. So this is a super interesting piece. And of course, this comes on the tail of her approval rating hitting a historically low 28%. We covered that recently on the show. And there's a lot of talk in Washington about her being replaced, about the Democratic Party, doing something about the fact that she's so unpopular and seemingly incapable of winning an election, especially with Republicans gaining prominence as the midterms approach. There looks like they're going to have an absolute landslide, red wave type, victory in the midterms. And because of that, obviously the Democrats are getting a little bit nervous about their prospects going forward, especially if people as unpopular as Kamala remain the face of the party. So we can go through this article a little bit, but what's your overall comment, Zach, on the situation that's going down?
Yeah, so I thought this piece was really interesting, mostly because it does provide a lot of context and insight into how her own staff is feeling, the people who work closest with Kamala, and that really shows her ass a bit, and it kind of shows exactly where, how she's feeling and really just the reality of the situation, right? I think she's correct to, feel like she's on the outside of a lot of the negotiations with Joe Biden, just because Joe Biden hasn't been including her in a lot of these negotiations. He never, as we've said multiple times on this podcast, he never wanted her to be vice president. And I think we were having an off-air conversation where you actually reminded me, Gavin, that his wife fucking hates Kamala Harris after what she did to him on the debate stage. So he's probably constantly hearing about that whenever they're around each other, and the way that the political machine forced him to pick Kamala Harris. So I'm sure that there's all of those personal feelings that still linger around it. And it kind of reminds me of like the West Wing a little bit, where the main protagonist president is like kind of estranged from his vice president, at least in the early seasons. I never watched the whole fucking show. I'm not like an expert on the West Wing, but kind of reminds me of that sort of a situation. And yeah, it's definitely going to be a detriment to any kind of re-election campaign that Joe Biden would, I hope, not try and launch, but it'll just be a detriment to the Democratic Party regardless of the way that they go, because they were really counting on this being a launching pad for Kamala Harris to be able to run her as this historic candidate, kind of trot out all of those arguments that the Democrats love for the most neoliberal fucking former top cop of California that is going to follow the empirical line 100%. That was the dream that Kamala Harris had, and that's what she thought she was buying into when she became the vice president. As it turned out, she's been scapegoated, and I don't give a shit, right? Kamala's just any other politician to me. I'm not worried about the way that her career turns out, but she obviously is, and it's no doubt that this was that they're definitely trying to blame Kamala and point to her incompetency and keep the pressure off Joe Biden, who is basically just not even present cognitively like 60% of the time.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. I do want to go through a little bit of this article. Worn out by what they see as entrenched dysfunction and lack of focus, key West Wing aides have largely thrown up their hands at VP Harris and her staff, deciding there simply isn't time to deal with them right now, especially at a moment when Biden faces quickly multiplying legislative and political concerns. Exasperation runs both ways. Interviews with nearly 36 former and current Harris aides, administration officials, Democratic operatives, donors, and outside advisors. So this is not just hearsay or gossip. This is, collected from a series of over 36 interviews with people that are inside, have insight into the situation because they are on the ground there. So, take that for what it is. They said they spoke extensively to CNN, and it reveals a complex reality inside the White House. Many in the vice president's circle fume that she's not being adequately prepared or positioned, and instead is being sidelined. The VP herself has told several confidants she feels constrained in what she's able to do politically. and those around her remain wary of even hinting at future political ambitions, with Biden's team highly attuned to signs of disloyalty, particularly from the vice president. Says she's now a heartbeat away from the presidency. She could be just a year away from launching a presidential campaign of her own, given doubts throughout the political world that Biden will actually go through with the re-election bid in 24, something he's pledged to do publicly and privately. She'll be a critical validator in 3 years for a president trying to get the country to re-elect him to serve until she's 86.
Do you want to pause there really quick? Because I think that that's important to talk about really quickly, and I would be interested to kind of get your thoughts about it. I think that's one of the more interesting elements of the article is the fact that, you know, Joe Biden's kind of like a mafioso. He's trying to like hold out for her to like prove her loyalty to him, to kind of like kiss his ring, to kind of get back in his good graces after she savaged him on the debate stage. And, you know, I was the girl, that little girl that you opposed budgeting for. I mean, honestly, we all thought he was finished after that. So, you know, that, I mean, he probably thought he was finished after that. You know, that's the kind of shit that as a politician, you know, actually will stick with you, unlike any of the crimes that you've committed or the people you fucked. So I think that he is very skeptical of Kamala Harris, and he doesn't want to be her stepping stone to the presidency. I think that in all of his delusion, Joe Biden and probably his most insular circle still think he's going to run for re-election in the up next in 2024. And boy, what a commotion that will cause. If the Democratic Party doesn't want the sitting president to be on the top of the ticket, they're going to try and split it however many ways. And then to put a fork in that for 1 second, I also want to know how bad that makes you feel that there's absolutely no lefty that can sneak in when they're absolutely this fractured.
Yeah, I know. Well, that's the tragic thing about this is that seemingly there's no real leftist insurgent challenge that's going to be prepared, willing, and able to, you know, fill this void right now. We'll see. It's always possible someone comes out of nowhere. But yeah, I totally agree with that. Let's read a little bit more of this piece. It gets pretty interesting here. Go down. It says, few of the insiders who spoke with CNN think she's being well prepared for whichever role it will be. Harris is struggling with a rocky relationship with some parts of the White House, while longtime supporters feel abandoned and see no coherent public sense of what she's done or been trying to do as vice president. Yeah, all that I can tell that she's been doing is going around to these scripted, you know, vignettes with these child actors talking about NASA and talking about space and stuff for some reason. So yeah, she clearly isn't actually doing anything or serving any substantive role as far as legislative negotiations go. But it says being the first woman and the first woman of color in national elected office is historic, but also comes with some outside scrutiny and no forgiveness for even small errors, as she'll often point out. Defenders,
it's basically bad PR.
Yeah. Defenders and people who care for Harris are getting frantic when they're annoyed. Some pass around an Onion story mocking her lack of more substantive work. One with the headline, White House urges Kamala Harris to sit at a computer all day in case emails come through. And yeah, that's a very accurate Onion headline because that's essentially what she has been relegated to do. It says when they're depressed, they bat around the Aaron Sorkin style, speaking of the West Wing, rumor that Biden might try to replace her by nominating her to a Supreme Court vacancy. That chatter has already reached top levels of the Biden orbit, according to one person who's heard it. What are they planning on fucking shooting one of the Supreme Court justices? Like, what do you mean?
Yeah, he won't stack the court. Maybe if he was interested in stacking the court, that could make it a little more politically salient for people. But it's also like, what the fuck is Kamala Harris going to do on the bench? Be fucking terrible on basically everything besides abortion and maybe one or two other issues.
Yeah, exactly. It's pretty hilarious. Although that might be the most artful way to dispose of Kamala. You know, giving her a Supreme Court seat, being like, there you go. Now you have a lifetime job, fat paycheck, and tons of power and prestige to go along with it. That might be the only artful way to dispose of this problem if you're Biden. So that's certainly an interesting idea, although, like it says, very Aaron Sorkin's-esque. Says she's perceived to be in such a weak position that top Democrats in and outside of Washington have begun to speculate privately, asking each other why the White House has allowed her to become so hobbled in the public consciousness, at least as they see it. An incumbent vice president should be a shoo-in the next time the party's presidential nomination is open, but guessing who might launch a theoretical primary challenge to Harris has become an ongoing insider parlor game. Other politicians with their own presidential ambitions have started privately acknowledging that they are trying to figure out how to quietly lay the groundwork to run if and when Harris falters, as they think she may. The reality is more complex and looks different to people more familiar with how any White House actually works. Harris is the first vice president in decades to come into office with less Washington experience than the president, and finding her footing was always going to be hard. Presidents and vice presidents and their staffs often clash. It's a conundrum unique to her. People are expecting their historic vice president to make history every day, when in fact she's trying to carry the duties of a secretary role. Harris is being judged not just by how she's doing in the traditional duties of a vice president, a longtime operative who has become Harris's most important outsider advisor. It's a little more subliminal, but it's real. What is her playbook in history? So this is a pretty long article, and you guys can check out the entirety of it if you want. But it basically just explains how at every point in the administration's history thus far, Kamala has been relegated to the sidelines of every important deal, every successful aspect of the Biden administration. But more importantly, what she's been relegated to are some of the toughest issues to deal with politically, such as immigration, the border. She was seemingly put in charge of that situation. She had to go make the speech in Latin America telling people do not come here, that kind of stuff, which has only served to make her less and less popular. And that's why now she's, her and her aides and team are going to CNN to complain about the fact that instead of, being let in on important negotiations for things like the Build Back Better plan and stuff that she could actually, use to improve her own political chances by talking about how she was instrumental in these negotiations and how she gained this insight and learned from Joe Biden as his apprentice and all this stuff. No, instead she's being relegated far away from that stuff, far away from the domestic stuff, and into some of the toughest, most politically tenuous aspects of the administration, such as the border. So she basically feels totally sidelined. She feels like she's being set up for failure, and likely she is. And overall, she's just failing to bring anything to this administration. She's only increasing people's, ill feelings towards it by being such a terrible spokesperson, by being so politically untalented and so uncharismatic.
Yeah, and she's shooting herself in the foot if she thinks she's going to be able to fucking repair her relationship and Joe Biden by having 36 or more of her, closest aides run to CNN and talk about how pissed off she is by how she's being treated in the White House. It's absolutely absurd to me to think that she thinks that this is a good political career move. That being said, I never thought that Kamala was the sharpest tool in the shed anyway. None of these neoliberal Democratic operatives are, right? They just intentionally make the most quickest, most, impulse decision that they think will get them climbing to the top. And typically the way that it works in a democratic fucking world is dem world is that they'll just overlook any of your side steps that you made as long as you were pursuing that ultimate goal of preserving neoliberalism in the Democratic Party. What happened though is that Kamala Harris is caught kind of between a rock and a hard place, right, where she committed an offense that was just something that would be totally overlooked, had you been talking to like a normal Blue Dog audience, right? Nobody cares that she savaged Joe Biden that one day, but Joe Biden cares, and Joe Biden's family cares, and his team cares, and the people that have been around him for a long time. So when she became the one that he needed, he did it begrudgingly, but now she's paying the Pied Piper, so she gets to be vice president in the history books, but instead she's going to take all of the dumping, and because Joe Biden is such a god-awful president, and she's a god-awful vice president, there's a lot of dumping to be done. So I just don't understand the political calculus of somebody who wants to benefit their career. I imagine that she has aspirations of the presidency. So this is just the worst idea ever, having a bunch of aides run to CNN to bitch about this, even though it's all entirely true, right? Just from a political analysis, just from a strategical standpoint, this really handicaps her career. So I just think that one of the things that we really need to take away from this is the fact that, I don't even know how much we're going to see Kamala running for re-election, actually. You know what I mean? I think that even though she wants it, obviously desperately, I think the Democratic Party is going to realize just how fucking gone she is, that Joe Biden is going to continue to kind of pummel her in the White House and use her as a scapegoat. And then I think you're going to see guys like Pete Buttigieg going to come out of the woodwork. He's been taking a lot of flack now. That doesn't matter as far as 2024 is concerned. Blue Dog Media will cover all of that up. And then it'll just be, the occasional internet YouTuber that's like, remember when he was gone forever on paternity leave during that really big crisis that he was supposedly responsible for? Everybody will be like, shut the fuck up. Do you want Trump to win? Huh? You fucking fascist, you sympathizing white supremacist. That's what's going to come now. And I guess what I'm asking, Gavin, is do you think that Pete is really the natural heir at this point? Because I think that maybe like a Pete Klobuchar is the kind of shit that we're going to have to deal with, if I'm being honest. I don't know who else, because I don't know who else will run. I mean, Beto, he's going to get slaughtered in the governor election. So, I mean, maybe they'll decide to pick him up and dust him off one more time for a run for presidency, but I doubt he'll get over 3-4%. Who's going to run? Frackenlooper, is he going to get back in? Is Jay Inslee going to get back in? I don't know, but I still think that Pete would nominally do better than those people. He takes a super neoliberal establishment, Amy Klobuchar type character as his running mate. I'm worried that that's where we're going to be, or Joe Biden swaps out Kamala for Pete. I don't know.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be an interesting situation to watch unfold. But the one element of this story that I don't think is being talked enough about is the fact that, the people that are going to jump into this primary in 2024, if and when Kamala looks like she's weak and could be easily taken down, which is probably definitely going to happen. It's not just going to be these other, Washington insider politician types like Pete Buttigieg and Amy Klobuchar that see a lane and then see an opportunity. Let's not forget that there's plenty of billionaires and celebrities that are nominally on the Democratic side as well that would absolutely love the chance to get in a Democratic primary when the competition is so goddamn weak. I'm thinking specifically of Howard Stern. He just floated a run for 2024.
I forgot he's a billionaire. Fuck.
Yeah, and he said it would be his civic duty to challenge Trump because he knows he could beat him. So trust me, guys, there's going to be a shit ton of celebrities and billionaires, rich people that come out of the woodwork to try to run for president. And this even happened last time when the competition was actually strong, not incredibly weak, when we had the ex-vice president Joe Biden and the former runner-up in 2016 and Bernie Sanders in the race. All these motherfuckers still tried to do this. Remember Mike Bloomberg, Howard Schultz was considering running. Remember Deval Patrick jumped in at the end. I guess he's a little bit more of a traditional politician than some of the other ones, but
still fucking embarrassed himself.
Yeah, he absolutely embarrassed himself. But like I said, if the competition is Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg, Amy Klobuchar, this new crop of, frankly, extremely untalented Democrats when it comes to their political abilities, then yeah, I definitely think that's going to open up a lane for some brash, arrogant billionaire or celebrity. The Rock has been talking about running. Even Mark Zuckerberg in the past has, implied that he's interested, stuff like that. So, who's to say who it'll be or if it'll be someone like that? But I just don't think that's being talked about enough. And again, Pete Buttigieg ain't going fucking anywhere, dude. Fucking Kamala Harris, Amy Klobuchar, these are non-entities. No one wants these people to be the president. Only a small faction of voters, even on the Democratic side, are really all that enamored with these folks anymore. And I can even tell you that from personal anecdotal experience. Like my family members that are vote blue no matter who types, they're not enamored with fucking Kamala Harris. Hell no. So